May the words of my mouth and the meditations of our hearts be acceptable in your sight, O God, our strength and our Redeemer. Amen. I was leading a confirmation class for my youth group some years ago, and our topic that afternoon was the 10 Commandments. And I said to my youth, so tell me, which of the 10 Commandments are hardest for you to keep? And the first answer didn't surprise me much. The very first one, this was almost a consensus, the hardest commandment to keep was honor your father and mother. Because when you're 15 and 16, that can be a difficult thing to do. The second answer, though, actually really surprised me. Because the second commandment they found very hard to keep was keep holy the Sabbath day. And as we talked more about that, they said with hours and hours of homework, and with sports, and with activities, and with friends, and everything that they were involved in, their Sundays were just packed from early morning until they went to bed. And they said to me, some days we really want to come to church, but we are just so tired by the time Sunday comes around, we can't get up to come to church. And that, of course, got me thinking, and I'm wondering, I'm sure none of you are like me, you're not thinking right now about whether you're going to Target and Ralph's after church, and the chores you need to get done for your family to be ready for the week, the laundry, and the grocery shopping, and making sure your cars have gas, and making sure all of your kids' homework is done, and. None of you do that on Sunday in church, I'm sure. Our lives are so full and so busy, and especially if you have children or if you take care of grandchildren. It hardly seems like there's enough hours in the week to get done everything that needs to get done, to keep body and soul and family together. Well, of course, the beginning of the Sabbath day comes right out of Genesis and the creation story. God finished all of His work and saw that it was good and rested on the seventh day. But there's something about this idea of a day set aside for some rest. An ancient idea. People in Jesus' time, most of them lived a subsistence life, and they worked 6 days a week from dawn until dusk, with very little time for recreation, very little time for relaxation, very little time for building communities and connections, because they were busy just trying to eat and to survive. And so by providing a Sabbath day, they were provided a day that was set aside for building connections with family, with friends, with community. And of course, if you have God or the church saying, this day is holy, that gives you the opportunity to say, sorry, I can't do that. It's the Sabbath day. I need this time for rest and for recreation and for time with friends and family. Because the whole purpose of the Sabbath day is actually to do nothing else but go to church, rest, visit, spend time with friends, eat, and sleep. So instead of doing all your errands this afternoon, go home and take a nap. That's the bottom line. You'll all be much happier on Monday morning. But this idea of Sabbath actually runs through our readings this morning. It comes up in Isaiah. And of course, our reading from Isaiah this morning comes very late in the book of Isaiah. And it was a time when the people were finally looking forward to being free from being captive, able to make their own decisions again, able to keep the Sabbath day in a way they had not been able to keep it before. So there was rejoicing over the ability to keep the Sabbath. But when we reach our gospel lesson this morning, we have this very interesting interaction between Jesus and the Pharisees. Not surprising. Jesus has run-ins with the Pharisees through all of the Gospels. Most of them end with, and they went away to plot Jesus' death. But again, we have Jesus with a run-in with the Pharisees on a topic that you would think they would agree on: keeping the Sabbath day holy. But the Pharisees looked at keeping the Sabbath day holy in a very different way than Jesus looked at it. The Pharisees were so caught up in the rules and the rigidity of the life of their faith that they couldn't see what the truth about the Sabbath was. The truth about the Sabbath was in some ways about binding people together, binding communities together, binding families together, binding ourselves deeper in relationship with God by spending time in church and with our community praying. But that was meant to set us free. It was meant to give us a freedom of spirit, a bit of a freedom of life, a freedom of time, a freedom of relationship. And instead the Pharisees were saying, no. You can't do that on the Sabbath, because then you're violating God's plan, God's law. And Jesus is saying, how can making someone well and someone whole possibly be violating God's Spirit or God's intention? Again, we're sort of back to that phrase that the Sabbath was made for humans, for us to have that time. And so when we reach the end of our gospel lesson this morning, we find a very interesting twist has taken place. The woman who was bound was set free on the Sabbath, free to be in greater relationship, free to be in greater relationship with God. Her life was set free because she was finally loosed from this terrible ailment she had. And who remains bound? The Pharisees remain bound by the Sabbath, by the fact that they can't let go of all of those rules. And so I think this gospel lesson this morning invites us to reflect on a couple things. Where are we bound? And where can we find some freedom? What is holding you this day, this our Sabbath day, when we should all go to church, have some lunch, and take a nap? What is holding you bound? Where is God not able to break in and break through? Where are you in such a hurry that the relationships with friends and family and community get shoved aside again? Because there's so many things that we need to do and accomplish and finish. Where are you being bound? Where do you need to be set free? God is waiting to set each one of us free in the ways that we need. Whether it's the Sabbath day or not the Sabbath day, reflect for some time on where you need to be set free and how are you going to let God in to set you free and let you go. Amen.